And once our city attorney starts, we can start our consent agenda, but we'll get going here. So good afternoon. Welcome. This is the October 5th, 2021 meeting of the Landmark Preservation Commission, and I'll call this meeting to order. Let's start with introductions of the commissioners. I'll go ahead and get started. My name is Kelly Wemple. I'm an architect and I was nominated by the American Institute of Architects. Next, we have George.
I'm George Dennis. I was nominated by History Colorado, and I live in a landmark property.
Great. Brad.
Hi, my name is Brad Gassman. I'm an architect, and I was nominated by History Colorado.
Aaron.
Good afternoon. I'm Erin Hummel. I'm a landscape architect, and I was nominated by the American Society of Landscape Architects.
Graham.
I'm Graham Johnson, general contractor and project manager, nominated by the Denver Planning Board.
Julie.
Hi, I'm Julie Johnson. I'm a historic preservation project manager, and I was nominated by the community at large.
Gary.
Hello, I'm Gary Petrie. I'm an architect, and I was nominated by the Denver Planning Board.
Erica.
Hi, I'm Erica Warzel. I'm an architectural historian and preservation consultant, and I was nominated by the community at large.
Thank you. And Jen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Jen Capetto. I'm landmark preservation staff.
Thanks. All right. Next on our agenda, we have meeting records, but there aren't any on our agenda today, so we'll go ahead and skip over that. We do reserve time at the beginning of every landmark preservation meeting to provide public comment. Now, this is for general preservation matters, not any one particular project that's on our agenda today. We will have separate public comment periods at that time when those projects are through design, or when we're in design review for those projects, we'll ask for comments at that time. So you can see up on the screen the options for providing public comment. If you're joining by phone, please press *9 on your keypad. That's going to allow you for us to see your hand is raised, and we can unmute you at that time. Or you can email landmark@denvergov.org to let us know your name, your number, and what you'd like to speak on today. If you're joining via computer, you can use the hand raise button on Zoom. It should be on the bottom of your screen. So is there anyone who would like to provide a public comment today?
See none.
Okay. And Jen, do we have anyone joining by phone? Do I need to keep
we have
repeating?
we have 2 people joining by phone.
Just for future reference, that's good to know. All right, if there are no public comments, we'll go ahead and move forward. We still don't have Nate on the line, right?
So he's here.
He is.
Yes,
okay.
I'm here. Sorry about that.
No problem. I couldn't see you on my panelist screen. So great. Then we'll go ahead and get started with our consent agenda. So I'll go ahead and announce the consent agenda. And if any commissioners have to recuse themselves, go ahead and let us know. Or if you have any projects you'd like to be pulled off consent agenda, let us know at that time as well. So let's review our consent agenda items. There are 6 projects on here. Brittany, did you have something to announce?
I did have a clarification for my item on the consent agenda. It's not an egress window. It is a project request for a administrative adjustment request for a setback. Just for clarification.
Thank you, Brittany. Yeah, I saw that on the agenda. It's right in the staff brief though. So great. All right, so there were 6 projects on consent. Are there any questions for staff or any projects commissioners would like to pull off consent? And if not, would someone like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I can make a motion.
Great.
All right, I will move to approve consent agenda items number 2021-COA-379 at 331 Cherokee Street, 2021-COA-422 at 3343 Lowell Boulevard, 2021-COA 423, 629 Gilpin Street, 2021-TAXC-007 at 475 Franklin Street, 2021-COA-406 at 245 West 4th Avenue, and 2021-COA-302 at 2540 California Street.
Thank you, Graham. That was a long one. Do we have a second?
Madam Chair, I'll second it.
Thank you, Julie. All right, then I will call for the vote. As always, we'll be voting alphabetically. So George, you're up first.
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Graham,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Erica,
Aye.
and Kelly. Aye. All right, so we have a unanimous vote and the motion passes. If you're on our call today for one of the projects that was on consent agenda, your project has been approved and you can feel free to exit the call if you'd like. So now we're going to move forward into design review projects, and I'll announce the item first. Oh,
Kelly, someone has their hand raised from the public. I don't know. I'm not sure which project they're representing. Actually, yeah. Can we check to see what they're asking about, if it's a project related? I'm guessing it has to do
Sure.
with an approval of consent to see what to do
Okay.
next.
okay.
So let's see. Oops. Martin, you are, or McMillan. I'm not sure if you're McMillan Martin or Martin McMillan, or a different name. Please feel free to unmute yourself and
Yeah, can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm making a comment. I don't know if you're the approval that was made a few minutes or seconds ago was also include the 331 fence that's being built. Can you confirm?
Yes.
That's what I'm
So
trying to speak to. So, okay, so
Well-
can I comment about?
we don't have a public comment period in the consent agenda items, just for the design review section.
Yeah.
Okay, so the fence that's being built is what you're saying is that's too high, according to even not in compliant with the Denver code, is being approved. Is that what you're saying? From the
Yes.
approval?
Yes, they submitted for
that's
an
what
overheight fence permit and it's been approved.
Okay, and that's what I'm trying to comment, because I'm the one who lives next door, and basically that fence is like a wall, and you're approving it. You're just basically creating an example for everyone to follow, like myself and everyone else in the neighborhood.
I'm sorry, sir, but there's no time for public comment on that. It's already been voted upon. So we could have received public comments in advance of the meeting on it, but
Well, I didn't know. This is my first time to join it, so I
Gotcha.
didn't know what to join, what to say, or when to make the comment.
I'm
Understood.
sorry, but yeah, we're gonna have to move forward into our design review items.
And Jessie has her hand up as well on this too.
Yeah,
so.
Jesse.
Yeah, this is my project, Mr. McMillan or Mr. Martin. I'm more than happy to speak with you aside from the meeting regarding this project. It did come in as a violation, and they have gone through the proper avenues of review with the Landmark Preservation Commission, and we'll have to with zoning as well. So if you want to reach out to me, you may do so, and I'm more than happy to talk to you about this project outside of the meeting.
That'd be great, Jesse, if you could do that. And I don't know if zoning has a comment period since, okay.
So zoning can review overheight fences through the ZPIN process. It's an administrative review process as long as it's under 8 feet, I believe. Isn't that correct, Jen? And Of course, all fences are reviewed by us. We do require that over height fences provide other examples of over height fences in the district. The applicant provided 2 other fences on either side of this property that were over height. And then I was able to find other examples in the recent vicinity, in the surrounding vicinity to support over height fences. There was an issue with the gate swinging into the neighbor's property, but that has been remedied. The applicant will be moving the gate where it swings onto their own property. So other than that, it meets all of our requirements for review.
Great,
And
thanks,
since
Jessie.
Yeah, and since it's been approved, I think we need to move on to design review.
Yeah, so if you could follow up with him individually, that'd be great. All right, so moving into the design review projects, I'll go ahead and announce the project, and then staff will make a presentation on the project and provide their recommendation to the commission. After staff's presentation, we'll call the owner, and they'll have up to 10 minutes to present. When that's done, we'll allow commissioners to ask the owner questions, and then we'll move into the public comment period. All public comments need to be made within 2 minutes per person. If you'd like to provide a comment, please use the hand raise button if you're joining us by computer, or use *9 to raise your hand if you're joining us by phone. Once public comments are done, the commission will move into deliberation and vote on the project. So the first project on review today is 2021-LM Demo-439. It's the property at 958 through 968 Washington Street. So Evan, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Sorry, I was having trouble finding the unmute button. Let me see if I can just progress the slide.
Evan, it looks like there's a bit of a lag going on.
Okay, have I
Not
jumped
horrible,
ahead too
but there
far?
is some.
Mine hasn't moved at all.
Oh. Is it moving for those of you, everyone else?
It just moved for me.
Okay.
Strange.
See if I can get to the.
So that's
correct.
the design review process right there.
Oh, gee. Okay.
So, all right, how about I move the slides and then you tell me where to go?
That would be great if you wouldn't
Okay.
mind. Okay, so here we go. As Kelly said, this project, we're looking at a project at 968 Washington Street, which is this apartment building pictured here. It's called the Mary Lou. We believe it would be considered a contributing building within the Quality Hill Historic District, constructed at some point between 1904 and 1925. Jen, if you could go to the next slide. In question is the garage at the rear of this property located along the alley, which the applicant is applying for permission to demolish. So just for reference, you can see Washington Street and 10th Avenue. The Mary Lou is the flat roof structure at the southeast corner of that intersection. And the garage is the rectangular structure along the alley there with the pyramidal roof. For reference, the boundary of the Quality Hill Historic District runs along that alley, along the garage, crosses 10th Avenue, and then just encompasses one property deep on the north side of 10th Avenue, and then the district is primarily to the south west. So you can see there the garage in question. And then Jen, if you could go to the next slide, please. So Section 30-11 of the Landmark Preservation Ordinance states the following: in determining whether a structure or feature is contributing or non-contributing to the structure, or in this case, the district, for preservation, the commission shall determine whether the structure or feature retains integrity and then evaluate the following criteria. A, whether the structure or feature is listed as contributing or non-contributing in the designation ordinance, or in the designation application, whether the structure or feature was constructed within the period of significance for the district for preservation, and C, whether the structure or feature contributes to the significance for which the district, in this case, was designated. So neither the ordinance nor the designation application contain a list of contributing or non-contributing structures or features. The designation application does mention a handful of individual structures, the Mary Lou among them, providing some brief historical overviews. However, throughout the entire application, there is no mention made of any accessory structure within the district. And it even mentions a bunch of structures that aren't in the district. So it's a little bit of an odd designation application. So the garage was originally constructed sometime between 1904 and 1925 based on the Sanborn fire insurance maps. And presumably the garage was constructed at the same time as the apartment building itself, and therefore within the period of significance. The 1995 designating ordinance states that the Quality Hill district is significant, whereas the district has character, interest, and value as part of the development, heritage, and cultural characteristics of the city, is identified with persons who had some influence on society, exemplified the cultural, political, economic, social, and historic heritage of the community, embodies those distinguishing characteristics of an architectural type specimen, includes the work of architects and master builders whose individual work has influenced the development of the city, contains elements of architectural design, detail, material, or craftsmanship which represent a significant innovation, is part of a distinctive area and should be preserved according to a plan based on its historic, cultural, and architectural motif. So obviously this designation was submitted under criteria that are separate from those that we review now, but this is as much of a sort of statement of significance as we could find that lays out specifically what areas of significance should be considered for this district. So to address each of those, in the opinion of staff, the garage does not contribute to the character, interest, or value of the development, heritage, or cultural characteristics of the city. It's a modest and relatively nondescript service structure supporting the residential function of the primary historic building. And sorry, I'm just realizing I should have given a little bit of orientation to these images here. On the left is a view from the intersection of Washington and 10th Avenue. You can see the north elevation of the apartment building proper there, and then peeking out between the trees and kind of large shrubs, you can see a white door, which would be the garage door of the garage in question. And then on the right are some more detailed images showing the 10th Avenue elevation of the garage and its relationship to the apartment building. So apologies for not having sort of just walked you quickly through those images beforehand. Getting back to the areas of significance, there's no evidence that the garage is identified with a person who had influence on society. It does not exemplify the cultural, political, economic, or social heritage, social or historical heritage of the community. Again, being a pretty modest accessory structure. It does embody the distinguishing characteristics of a garage type structure. However, the type is not called out in the designation as being significant. More so, the district was designated for the types of grand single family homes and high style apartment buildings that you find here in Mary Lou being an example of one of the high style apartment buildings. The garage is not the work of an architect or master builder identified in the designation application. It does not contain elements that represent a significant innovation, again, being rather typical of alley garage structures. And while the garage is part of the distinctive area of Quality Hill, of the Quality Hill Historic District, it does not contribute significantly to the historic, cultural, or architectural motifs, and therefore does not require preservation. The garage retains integrity of location, setting, and feeling. However, replacement of both the garage and man door along 10th Avenue have negatively impacted the integrity of design, material, and workmanship. Again, as the garage is not as strongly associated with events or individuals of significance, it doesn't really carry an integrity of association. So in summary, staff are recommending the garage as non-contributing and that the demolition be conditionally approved. The structure does retain integrity and was constructed within the period of significance. However, the garage has not been identified as contributing and does not contribute to the significance of the district. The garage was built of masonry that matches the primary structure of the Mary Lou Apartments, but is otherwise a simple utilitarian structure. The commission should also note that in historic districts, accessory structures, even when built within the period of significance, are typically assumed to be non-contributing unless a strong and clear connection to the significance of the district can be identified. In this case, no such connection is evident. If the commission were to disagree with the staff assessment and find the garage is contributing to the district, a public hearing would need to be set for review of the garage demolition. And then some additional considerations. Guideline 2.38 states preserving original detached garages and secondary structures where feasible is recommended. In this case, the applicant is applying for demolition of the garage in preparation for redevelopment of the site with a new multi-unit apartment building. It would not be feasible for the applicant to retain the garage structure while pursuing redevelopment of the ground beneath it. Therefore, staff have found that demolition of the garage would be appropriate. The applicant has met with staff to discuss the proposed infill. The new apartment building would be presented to the LPC separately, of course, through the two-step infill process, which would include the required consultation with the registered neighborhood organization. Redevelopment is currently not proposed to include any alterations or additions to the historic primary structure. So in summary, staff have found the garage to be non-contributing, given that it doesn't contribute to the significance of the district, and because the applicant's proposed redevelopment of the site would not be feasible without removal of the garage. So we have therefore found it appropriate to demolish the original garage.
Thank you, Evan. Are there any questions for staff?
Yeah, I have a couple questions, or one question with two parts. So the space between the garage and the apartment building with the arched entry feature and the steps and the kind of site wall, are those considered part of the primary structure, the garage, or neither? And are those also being demolished as part of this proposal?
I haven't actually discussed those features specifically with the applicant, so it may be worth asking them.
Okay.
I think I would say that in my mind, that would be considered some sort of a separate site feature that should be reviewed as part of the design review. So it is important to remember that this would just be a conditional approval, and you would have sort of a final say in the design review process for the infill, I think, where you could get into more detail.
Sure.
Perhaps, say that those should be retained.
Right. And we could ask the applicant that as well. Erin, did you say you had more than one question? Did you have another one?
No, there were just the different parts of one question, like,
Great.
because it's attached to the primary structure. So I just wondered.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? All right. If not, then is the applicant present, and have they been promoted so they can present?
Yeah, Emily is working on that.
Great. Once you're promoted, you'll need to unmute yourself, and then please start with your name and address for the public record. You'll have up to 10 minutes.
Hi. Could you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. Hi, everyone. My name is Frank Campisi, and my address is 1242 West Lawrence in Chicago, Illinois. I am one of the principals of a real estate investment company called JAB Real Estate. We've been in business for 11 years in our current iteration, but my business partner and I have worked together for 20. We've been doing vintage renovations for all of that time. So the properties that are most interesting to us are vintage properties kind of from this era. In fact, we were very familiar with working within a landmark district or working with a landmark property. We've done an adaptive reuse of a small power substation for the Chicago Transit Authority. We renovated 2 churches into apartment properties. We've renovated a convent into an apartment building, and we've renovated a rectory into an apartment building. So as part of that process, we've won 2 different landmark awards from the city of Chicago. So we have a good understanding and appreciation of how to keep the original character of a property and still add the modern amenities and things that a contemporary renter would look for. When we look at this property, similar to what Evan has summarized much more eloquently than me, and that is that the garage is pretty bland. It really doesn't add anything to the property. We would look to build a new structure and have it have contextual reference to not only to the building adjacent to it, but also be built within the character of the neighborhood. As Evan had noted, we've had a conversation with Evan already, and understand that the new structure or the existing structure would sit proud of the new structure. And the new structure, again, would not be taller than the existing structure, and again, would be there to complement it, but not to mimic it, but more just to look as if it were in the neighborhood, like many of the other multifamily buildings in this landmark district. And my architects on the call as well, I don't know if Paul wants to add anything, but that's kind of.
Sure. Excuse me. Hi, Frank. Can you guys hear me? I'm going to make sure I'm unmuted.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Hi, this is Paul Bryant with Bryant Flink Architecture and Design. Yeah, Frank, thank you. I can just sort of interject a few other points. Certainly with JAB Real Estate and Frank, I mean, they're aware of the sensitivity around historic development. So I think we can, tackle all that through design review. But I do want to mention, in addition to the building itself not being a contributing, member to the historic district, the parking itself is non-conforming. If you were to go inside that garage, the striping is actually for a one-way drive aisle. And so people currently that use that would need to back out across the right-of-way into the street, reverse out, because there's no way to turn around. And so the conversations about redevelopment were really about trying to make the parking more conforming. And as we looked into it further, it has no presence on the street. There's no transparency. There's no detailing that's adding any vibrancy to the district. And so in trying to achieve a conforming parking situation and then achieve transparency along the right-of-way, it's sort of why we decided to reach out and talk to Evan about sort of how do we improve the fabric, and then also making a conforming structure. So the new parking currently anticipated would be off the alley in a more contemporary sort of an automated stacked parking system. The width of the building itself is just not wide enough to park it anyway. So this new parking would then solve the parking troubles for the Mary Lou, and then in addition to the new structure, which is anticipated about 18 new dwelling units would be in the place of this parking garage. So I think just obviously to improve the street wall and improve the transparency and the overall fabric, I mean, that's pretty apparent, I think. To answer the question about the space between the buildings, so number one, the building will be 10 feet from the Mary Lou, just in order to maintain a proper fire separation for unprotected openings. But as you can tell from some of the images, there's a stoop off of Washington, and then 10th, the stairs that were mentioned sort of go to an elevated sort of court between the garage and the Mary Lou. And it would be the design intent to keep that and to keep that continuity as we sort of work through design review with the committee. So number one, I think, you know, the integrity of that arch and those stairs and having a court between the buildings is something that's desirable, and we want to sort of make it, you know, lively and in the amenity space. Right now, people go out there and sit on a lawn chair and smoke a cigarette. I think we could maybe liven it up with some more open space and greenery and maybe some water quality features. But absolutely, that's something that we want to maintain. And then certainly the garage is subservient already to the Mary Lou, and this building that we're proposing would certainly be the same. Sort of a you know, a little sister, a little brother of the Mary Lou, I think is the intent. So with that, Frank, I don't know if I missed anything, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything current, you know, right now based off of just the potential development.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for the applicants?
No,
I just
thanks,
have one
Paul.
question.
Paul answered my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Brad?
Sure, Aaron. Yeah, just to follow up on that, what Aaron's question was, what is the space between the building and the garage now? Is that about 10 feet or is that a little bit wider? You know, I'd have to look at the survey, but I think nominally 10 feet. That's about correct. Maybe 12, somewhere right in there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any public comments regarding this project? If so, please use the hand raise button at this time if you're joining us via computer, or if you're joining us by phone.
We don't have anyone else by phone.
*9 or not. Okay, great. Any public comments?
I don't see anyone's using the hand raise button, so no.
Okay. Then we'll just keep moving forward and we'll go into deliberation. Unless, Evan, do you have any follow-up?
No, I was just looking to see if I had a site survey to answer the question, but unfortunately I don't. So.
Gotcha. Okay, let's move into deliberation. All right, and at this time, you know, let's remember that we're just reviewing the demolition for this project, not really taking into consideration what's going to be constructed, because this would be a conditional approval, and prior to demolition, if it is conditionally approved, we will need to review and approve of the infill design. So what was everybody's thoughts?
I think granting the conditional approval would be fine. Let's see what they have. The garage is certainly not anything anyone would write home about. So let's see what they can come up with. So I see some lawn chairs there already. So.
Yeah, Kelly, this is Brad. I agree with staff's recommendation on the conditional approval. And what George said, I don't think this is a contributing structure, and I think it, as Evan wrote it, I agree with.
This is Erica. I'll weigh in. I, often raise questions about demolition of historic garages. I think in this case, it's appropriate to give a conditional approval. It was interesting. I was curious as to how this garage functioned. So that was good to hear from the applicant, because it certainly didn't look like one that we would normally expect. I think I'll just add two kind of tangential thoughts. One is that sometimes, of course, these garages can be important to the significance of the actual apartment building based on their historic development, how they were marketed, et cetera. I don't see any evidence of that for this building. And therefore I, agree with staff's assessment that it could be considered non-contributing. I think something I'd like to raise just for us to think about in our design guideline review upcoming for the secondary structures. When we talk about design guideline 2.38 and the feasibility of preserving a garage, I am not quite sure how to read that, because sometimes in preservation, we use that language of preserved when feasible. It's almost in relation to materials, if they're repairable or not. I don't really see the logic of the argument of the owner wants to do something else and therefore it's not feasible to preserve this building. I don't think that's right, kind of logical argument to make. Again, I don't think it's a issue for this building, but I think it's something that we should be thinking about in the design guideline reviews that we do. The revisions to the design guidelines that we talk about. Thanks.
I think that's a good point, Erica. We should discuss that with the update that's currently going on to the guidelines. I guess I'll weigh in. I agree with everything that's been said. I think Evan outlined it very nicely, and based on the staff brief, I concur that I don't think this is contributing, and it is often that we find garages are not included in the designation as listed as contributing. And so seeing that this doesn't add to the significance for which the neighborhood was designated, I agree that it's non-contributing. George?
Yeah, I was wondering if we could suggest reuse of the brick in the garage. That would be, okay, you're not preserving the garage, but if it was built approximately the same time as the apartment building, maybe that could be, if they produce a plan that has brick structure in it, we could say, fine, but you have to use what's left in the garage. So.
I think that's a good friendly comment. I don't think that that's something, personally, I don't feel like that's something we need to make a condition of.
Oh, no, I wasn't implying making it a condition, but if there's a way to stick it into the design review as a suggestion.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Or are we all in agreement? Okay, then who's going to make the motion?
I can make the motion.
Great.
I move to conditionally approve application 2021 LMDEMO 439 for total demolition of the garage at 958 through 968 Washington Street, section 30-11 of chapter 30 of the Denver Revised Municipal Code, as per design guidelines 2.38, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report, with the condition that a replacement plan be approved prior to beginning demolition of the garage structure.
Thank you, Brad. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, George. Okay, I will call for the vote. George?
Aye.
Brad?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Graham?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Gary?
Aye.
Erica?
Aye.
Kelly? Aye. All right. The ayes have it, a unanimous vote. So the motion passes and the project is conditionally approved. All right. So we'll move on to our second design review item, which is 2021-COA-431 at 3250 Bryant Street. And I believe, Abby, this is your project, so take it away.
Sure. Sorry, I'm trying. Wow, the controls just really are having issues today. Okay, let's see if I can actually get this to advance. Okay, we'll get started here. So this is a proposal for the construction of a rear yard ADU. The primary residence at 3250 Bryant Street, which you see there at the front, is a single-story classic cottage. The ADU will be located to the rear. So you see there the rear yard and then the view from the alley. So the ADU will include a 2-car garage on the ground level, which will be accessed via the alley, with dwelling areas in the basement and on the upper floor. So here you have the site plan. So you see the existing structure there to the left and the new ADU there to the right. The proposed ADU is quite wide. It's over 38 feet wide and will extend across most of the lot. But there is a conservation overlay for Potter Highlands, which reduces the interior side setback requirements for ADUs to 0. So they are within zoning here. Within 5 feet of that lot line, they may be subject to more restrictive building and fire code review, but this placement on the lot does meet zoning. So here you see drawings showing the 2 sides of the ADU and the comparison of the ADU to the primary structure. Though the ADU is 2 stories, due to the sloping ground, the ADU will be lower in height than the primary structure. The ADU will be primarily clad in fiber cement shingles with brick at the base. The siding will have a 7-inch reveal to the shingles, which is larger than was common historically in the district. Previously, Landmarks has requested that shingle siding have no more than a 5-inch reveal. But it appears that James Hardy is no longer offering siding with the shingle siding with a 5-inch reveal and is now just offering this 7-inch as the smallest reveal available. So here are views of the front and the rear of the ADU. The ADU does feature a complex roof form. You can see here it has the clipped gables. There's the pent roof off to the side, and then also the flat roof, and then a little bit of the kind of gable projection there. The ADU design appears to be drawn from bungalow examples. Bungalow or craftsman features included in the design include the low pitched roof, the clipped gables, the grouped windows, the decorative braces, the entry design, that pent roof, and the use of shingle siding. So here you can see a comparison of the proposed ADU to the existing primary residence. The proposed ADU does not have a strong visual relationship to the primary residence. The ADU primarily takes cues from bungalows in the district rather than from the classic cottage of the primary residence. Using a more similar roof form or pitch would help tie the ADU to the primary structure, but would violate the bulk plane and would require zoning adjustments. The applicant has met with the Planning and Community Development Committee of Highland United Neighbors, HUNY. The committee voted 3-0 to suggest further redesign of the ADU and offered a list of recommendations. The applicant has revised the design since this meeting and incorporated several of the comments made by the RNO. The following are the RNO comments that have not been addressed. The RNO did recommend that the pitch of the roof match that of the existing house and that a hipped roof form be utilized rather than a gable roof form. The RNO also said that if this required an administrative adjustment or variance, that they felt that that was appropriate. The RNO also suggested splitting the large garage door into 2 doors or moving the garage door to avoid having the upper level south wall bearing on the middle of the door. So staff feels that while the design could better relate to the primary structure, the ADU does relate to district forums and will have limited visibility due to its location at the rear of the lot. Staff is recommending approval with conditions to address some inconsistencies and missing information in the application, as well as some construction and material details. So staff recommendations include condition to include detail on the window wells shown on the basement plan level. So you can see the window wells here on that basement level to the left, but these window wells are not included anywhere else in the application. For window wells, Landmark does require cross sections. We also need information on the window design and the material of the window well. And the window well should be shown on the elevation drawings in the site plan. Also conditioned just to make sure that all drawings are consistent. There are discrepancies in addition to this one between the elevation drawings and the floor plans, some window locate and other opening locations. Also, there's some information shown on some of the floor plans that's not shown on the site plan. So all site details need to be shown on the site plan. And then the windows at the shingle siding should be recessed in the wall to fit district patterns. Currently, the window wall details show that the windows will be recessed in the brick, but as you can see here, they're not shown as being recessed in the shingle portion. And generally, Landmark requires that windows be recessed in the openings to create that shadow line that is similar to how windows were traditionally installed. And then finally, we would suggest a condition that the soffit material should be smooth. The specs here submitted by the applicant show that they are selecting to use the textured soffit material, but Hardy does offer a smooth soffit material. So staff would recommend the use of the smooth soffit material. And that's it.
Great. Thank you, Abby. Are there any questions for staff? No? All right. Is the applicant present? Can we promote them? Yep.
Looks like they're promoted.
Awesome. So you can go ahead and unmute yourself when you're ready. Please start with your name and address for the record, and you have up to 10 minutes.
Great. My name is Kevin Gim I'm the architect for the applicant. The homeowner was not able to attend due to conflicts with work. His name is Travis O'Brien, but my name is Kevin Gim. My address is 7786 South Curtis Circle, and I'm with Summit and Main Design. And I started out, just appreciate the commission's time here and being able to review this, and also the staff's work as well. One clarification I'd like to make is that we actually did receive R&O approval on the design as you see it submitted. I'm not sure what happened with getting notes or comments back, but the comments that were addressed from the R&O were all from a previous design that is not this one. So we did receive approval in August. So just in the stylistic, and made some notes there. We were looking at this in a few different light. I mean, initially actually looked at something that was more of a replication of the existing home and the cottage, classic cottage style. But in discussions with staff and looking at that, we decided that replicating the existing structure is maybe not the right move for this ADU, and that more looking at a complementary design. And so we looked at a few different options there, but ended up with what we have with the clip gables, replicating the hips up in the dormers, and then also trying to retain a site feature with the brick base that many of the bungalow styles have in the neighborhood. So yeah, there's really, I think the commission's seen the rest of the presentation, so there's really not too many additional items we'd like to present today, and I guess would hand it off to the commission for comment, and we'll be here for questions.
All right, thanks for your time. Are there any questions for the applicant? Yeah, Brad.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up kind of stylistically. So is kind of the decision to move away from the cottage style a bit was more Can you talk a little bit more about what that was driven by? I mean, part of it looks like it was driven somewhat by the bulk plane and trying to kind of make sure everything fit within the bulk plane. And then, you know, I was wondering about that flat roof section. Was there any other consideration given to how that was treated?
Sure. Address the first one. I think from a stylistic thing, I think maybe just as since it sounds like you're reviewing some of your design reviews as well. It's actually noting these not as a classic cottage in the neighborhood, but as a bungalow, a craftsman bungalow stylistic. And I think we had also that same discussions with the RNO of kind of what is the stylistic elements of the neighborhood as they're presented. But when you are correct that, you know, we're trying to work within the bulk plane here, trying to keep the home as a you know, smaller element and allow the main home to be the primary residence here. So I think there is some consideration there in the roof slopes as well. And that as we moved away from I guess the other reasons why we're moving away from that style is partly just usable space, as you can tell with the existing home. And even if to make that a true usable like ADU space in the back, the structure has to become much taller, and at that point is conflicting maybe with the existing residents in a sense. So I think this roof form allows us to retain usable space on the floor plate, but also keep down the size of it overall. And then referencing the flat roof on the south side of the project, there's a desire to be able to bring in as much light as we could into the home and into the bedrooms that are located on that side, or the bedroom that's located on that side. And also storage below. So there's working within the bulk plane, but also just stylistically there, trying to, I guess, form and function there, right? Trying to keep that open, keep the light coming in, and using that as your egress window is the other component of it. Because the windows on the back side of the home are not egress compliant.
Thank you.
I also had a question about the south portion with the flat parapet roof. So on sheet A 0.0, the west perspective had shown the brick kind of coming all the way up to the parapet around that area. And so I was wondering if maybe that was a previous design iteration, since the elevations in the drawing set show it consistently on all 4 elevations to be at that lower height. So I was just wondering what the consideration was to move that brick back down.
Sure. So you are correct. That was a previous iteration. We did miss, I think that's probably one of the reference design discrepancies in the package as well. But we were bringing that brick higher, 1 for fireproofing, and 2, originally we were starting and we had that wrapping and being part of the garage and having that as an element there. And in discussions with staff and looking at that, we elected to drop it to try to retain, as that wasn't a historic feature in the neighborhood, and trying to keep this brick base was something that we felt that was consistent within the neighborhood.
Okay, thanks. And then I did have one other question, and that's just in regards to the staff recommended conditions. Did you have any trouble with, I think the only one that maybe would be something an applicant might struggle with is the window condition. We require the windows be recessed within the wall plane. Did you have any concerns about that within the shingle?
Yeah, I mean, not ideal just because of the waterproofing details, as we'd have to look at the non-flanged windows or a different detail there. But I think there's ways to design
Yeah.
And a recessed window to be able to obtain that shadow line as desired.
Great. Any other questions for the applicant? No. All right. Thanks for your time. Are there any public comments on this project? Please use the hand raise button.
Yep, looks like Keith has his hand up. Keith, you are welcome to unmute yourself when you're ready.
Great. This is Keith Pryor, 2418 Champa Street. I don't have a comment per se on this project. I do have a question about the design review for the Civic Center that you guys will be doing as a discussion at the end of the meeting. And if there will be public comment for that discussion, or if that's just a discussion among board members at this time.
All right, thanks. Jen, we don't typically provide public comment for discussion items, right?
Correct, but it's at the chair's discretion.
Okay. Good question, Keith. You're making me think. I mean, it will come back at a future meeting, but if there are people on the line who were hoping to make public comments, we could provide a public comment period for that. So we'll go ahead and do that. Are there any public comments on the project we're reviewing right now at 3250 Bryant Street?
I'm not seeing any hands raised. So.
Okay, great. All right. Then we will move into deliberation, unless Abby, did you have any recap?
I'll just say concerning the RNO, what I included in the staff report was just based on the only letter actually submitted to staff from the RNO, but certainly I know that, the applicant, continued to meet with them. So they may have given, told the applicant later that they were then good with the design. My comments were just based on what had been formally submitted to Landmark.
Gotcha. So the RNO didn't get back to you after future meetings, or? Okay. All right. Thanks for the clarification. Let's move into deliberation. What was everybody's thoughts on the ADU design?
Kelly, I'll jump in here. I was kind of a fly on the wall listening to questions. It was great to hear the presentation here by the owner, and I think that helped. But I was frankly surprised to see a staff report where almost every guideline was a no, and the recommendation was still an approval. And I agreed with the analysis that was done here, and I just couldn't bring myself off of guideline 4.19 and the a subordinate and compatible structure. It felt like there were a lot of parts and pieces here that all spoke to different historic narratives, but again, kind of agree with the trying to weave them together in a way that still feels subordinate and not like a maximizing as much into whatever form allows for that to happen outside of kind of considering a bigger context was my initial concern. So I appreciate all those steps that were taken. I just don't know how well they all combine in the final effect here. And, again, that kind of subordinate compatible character of the Potter Highlands, I think, does span a huge variety of styles, but really tends to sort of a more compact Victorian era. And this feels much larger in mass and form than anything that I've encountered in that neighborhood. So I'm curious to hear what other commissioners think, but I agree with the staff report. I think all in except the final motion or the recommended motion, as it were.
Thanks, Graham.
This is Erica. I agree with everything that Graham said. I'd also like to add that I think 4.5 is another design guideline that I have a particularly difficult time kind of reconciling this design that we see today with, in particular, 4.5A, which concludes with, at a minimum, an acceptable design should be neutral and not detract from the district's historic character. And while I understand that the applicant was hoping to use other styles that are seen in the district as a way to meet their desire for size and floor plate use within the zoning, I don't feel like this is neutral. I feel like this does detract from the historic character because of its complex roof that doesn't really jive with a craftsman bungalow style. And of course that it's just not in direct conversation, if you will, with the primary structure. So I agree that I don't think I can support this design as it is today.
Thanks, Erica.
Kelly, this is Brad. I'll chime in. I thought, Grant, your comment about 4.19, that's the one that I was having the most trouble with too. And it comes down to the mass. I think that the way this roof is a little more squat than the cottage style home there, and then the elongation along the alley, the mass just doesn't seem to have the same characteristics. And so it does make it feel like a rather big building. So I'm in agreement with both Erica and Graham on this. And I think, like I said, I went back to 4.19, and that's one of them where I just think fundamentally the mass of the building is not in character with the existing structure on the site and some of the other structures around the neighborhood.
Thanks, Brad. I'm gonna chime in because I think it sounds like maybe in the minority of the commissioners. I agreed with the recommended motion in the staff brief, mainly because, when I first was looking at the design, I agree that it's not, replicating the form, especially the roof of the primary structure, but and it is rather large, but I actually thought they did a good job of using the grading of the site to kind of mask that. So when I was looking at the west perspective on sheet A 0.0 and the photo of the existing condition above, I think with that fence, which they're not showing in the perspective below, with that fence there, you're not even going to see as much of that. That perspective is almost taken a little bit higher than eye level too. So I think that with the grading going down towards the alley and it being situated lower at a lower grade than the primary structure, it's actually using that to make it more subordinate. It was my thought. So I know that the roof form does not match the slope of the primary structure, and I think it'd be nice if it did, but then it would be taller and less subordinate. So I agreed with the staff findings that it's compatible with the district, and there are other ADUs we've approved, like I'm thinking in Curtis Park, for instance, where the ADU doesn't match the design of the primary structure, but it matches the design of other building forms found in the district. We've even approved 2-story ADUs in Curtis Park behind 1-story primary residences that don't, have the design of the ADU matching the primary residence. So to me, I thought they went with the bungalow type that is found in the district, and that was enough to be compatible in my mind.
Kelly, I think those are all good comments about Curtis Park. I know the ADUs and the overlay, and there's a couple different things going on here. I think, Brad said it, and maybe I didn't say it as clearly as Brad did too, but I feel like this building without the side projection for the second garage spot fits that mass and form, a lot more compatibly with the district. And so I think, maybe in coming off too harsh initially, that there are definitely some good things going on, but that side projection, there's definitely a lot of little single or double garages that are flat roof like that. But I don't know that I've ever encountered one that is such a striking, arm or appendage of a bungalow style building. I think that just stretching across what is a wide lot, which is nice in a compact neighborhood. That was the part that really felt the most difficult to reconcile with that guideline 4.19. And a lot of the ADUs you mentioned were larger behind smaller homes and other things, but had maybe a more consistent mass, or, you know, I don't know that we've had a few side entries and things like that, but not a full kind of projected garage bay that just sticks out on the side like that. That was the part that was most concerning to me. Not to say that 2-car garages aren't wonderful. I'd hate to get in the way of anyone's garage space because I know how sacred that is too, but just as a friendly comment, I guess.
I guess I'd just like to follow up too that what Graham brought up as far as the garage extension was part of why I brought up 4.5, and that it's not just the clipped gable that I have an issue with as far as the complexity of the form of the roof, but also the building, but it's these projections, also the, I'm not quite sure what to call it, but what we see here on the screen to the left, I think that's just allowing maybe a larger floor plate on the second floor, but that additional pent roof, is it almost, that's at the entrance there behind the gable porch shelter. So these things together, I think, are part of why I'm looking at 4.5 in addition to 4.19. But I think Graham probably said it the best as far as concerns over all of these things combined together are problematic for me.
I have to take what Kelly said actually kind of to heart, simply because when in the overall we look for new structures or additions to be separate, at least visually, not look like they're trying to recopy the design that of the original building or the original the building that it's next to, or anything like that. And I think the architect or the designer in general gets stuck between how much do I identify with the building that I'm attaching to and or on the same property of, and how much do I have to differentiate. In view of the fact that, again, what Kelly noted is that most of this ADU is just not visible from the street. It looks like it's made good use of the land and the space, and we have to face that it has met the requirement that you can certainly tell it's not part of the original structure, or even trying to fake it alongside of it. Maybe there's an allowance of how much you can vary or how much you shouldn't, but since this since the craftsman style is apparently also included in the neighborhood, then I don't think that there's I don't see much of a problem for this particular ADU taking into account, well, you have to be different, but you can't be that different, but why don't you be different from something that's down the street? So I think they've made good use of what they had to work with as far as guidelines from us.
Thanks, George. Gary, Aaron, Julie, any thoughts? Just trying to see if we're reaching consensus or if we're kind of doesn't seem like we are.
I'm really torn because I'm looking at 419 as well. 4.19, I mean. It just doesn't, I mean, I guess my gut reaction is it just doesn't seem subservient to the original. The cottage, the cottage style is very simple and lovely in its simplicity. And I don't know, the complication of the roof is a little bit of a problem for me, I'll be honest. But I'm torn. Yes, it is not going to be particularly visible. I just, and I do share Graham's. I don't have a garage. I'd love to have one.
Me neither.
I hate to mess with the garage there, but that little offshoot is really, feels really awkward to me. And so I'm still kind of torn, to be honest with you.
Well, I'll weigh in. I listened to what everything everyone said and could be swayed one way or the other, but I think for me, it does come down to, I agree with staff's recommendation, and along with what Kelly was saying, the little garage flat roof is a little odd, but it can't be seen from the right of way. I do feel that this structure is subordinate to the main house in its mass and overall form, even with a more complex roof structure, which I don't think at the end of the day is all that much of a problem. So I would support the motion as presented to us by staff.
Gary, what are your thoughts? We've heard from everybody but you.
And when I first reviewed this, I was, generally inclined to go along with the staff's recommendation. However, I did find that flat roof section is kind of the most inconsistent piece of the design. If this was presented with a single car garage and the flat roof section was eliminated and no, projection on that side, for me, this would be a clear case of approval, regardless of the, the different roof style and a little bit of a more complicated roof. So I'm, I guess I'm inclined to deny this, I think, and see what kind of improvements might be made to make it a little more compatible. I think it's the complexity of the roofs, primarily adding the flat roof projection that is a problem for me. So I agree with the other commissioners who have a problem with that. I also am somewhat troubled by our efforts as a commission to be consistent from one ADU garage structure to another, from one district to another, because clearly we have approved in the past relatively large ADUs because of the double and triple garage requirements. And so, here I think it's a matter of the architecture of the ADU is a bit problematic by trying to make it a two-car garage requiring that flat roof extension. So it's a bit of a struggle for me, but I think I would deny this application as presented.
All right, so I think we've heard from everybody, and what I'm hearing is there are 5 commissioners who feel this is not meeting the guidelines and 3 who feel it is. So that tells me I think we're moving towards a denial, because I saw some nodding heads when Gary mentioned that. So I'm guessing there's not a condition that we can make. That it's more that the applicant needs to consider the feedback that was given and come back with a new proposed design. I would like to just see before we go towards a motion, if there's any more feedback we could give. And the reason I say that is one of the reasons I asked the question about the brick height. There's that perspective that showed the brick full height to the parapet. I almost felt like that made it feel like that section was almost like a site wall that died into the building, like that it looked like a different form. So I don't know if this is something that would, I wanted to run it by the people who felt that flat portion was not fitting with the rest of the building. I was wondering if the materiality or if there was a material change between that flat portion and the two-story portion, or if there was maybe like a shift in wall plane to kind of differentiate those two. Would that feel less like an appendage and more like a separate element? Or is your thought that, you know, that wouldn't improve things? Just curious.
Kelly, I think that's an interesting point. One of the thoughts I had when you mentioned that earlier was, you know, again, from the front, it could almost look like this was a small single or two-car garage that was a flat roof that was sort of engulfed by a larger, you know, not the type of addition to a primary structure that we might otherwise look at meeting the guidelines, and without offering, design input or anything like that, you know, some modulation of an existing smaller flat garage and a more residential form in the ADU, I think would make me feel better about that big long span across the alley. And I know we've talked about the visibility from the right of way, and I don't disagree with that, but I think as ADUs and, you know, all of this additional development are able to happen and start happening in these historic districts, that, you know, not that the alley is the same as the main public street and right of way, but it's all the fabric of the neighborhood, right? From all the way around. And I know that we consider rear elevations and other things with a different lens as well. But I do think that's an interesting idea, how material could maybe start to tell a different story that doesn't feel pushed out and projected, but maybe feels, you know, added onto and evolved or something like that.
Thanks, Graham. Yeah, that was my thought, is oftentimes when we review larger scale, you know, buildings in historic districts, not that this is a larger scale building, it's an ADU, but you kind of start to break down the mass by using, you know, kind of breaking it down with different forms. And so I was wondering if that would make it feel like it's kind of two parts rather than a complex roof as it was framed. Okay, Julie, Erica, Brad, Gary, do any of you feel like that could, just in nodding heads, would it, yes, maybe be something you'd consider, or no, you think it, you know, it's just too big with that appendage?
I would certainly consider that.
Okay. I just want to give the applicant an idea of like, where's the threshold? Because if they've got to come back, you know, is it that it needs to be cut off completely and gotten rid of, or is there some design solution they could look at?
No, I think if we could try to save that garage for the client or for the applicant, I think that would, you know, I would certainly entertain it.
So obviously there's many ways that that they could redesign this. I was just curious from a form standpoint. Any other comments?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just to kind of add on to it, I do really think that element is the most troubling element, and I understand what they're trying to achieve from a plan standpoint, and I don't disagree with that. It's just how all these pieces come together. It makes it overly complicated, and then I think the scale and the mass get, you know, with that garage door, and it's almost like a kind of a flag that sticks out there. It just works against what everything they're trying to accomplish, and that's where I think, you know, in relationship to some of the nice moves of the original house, it's the simplicity of the original house and the roof forms. This is missing that, and it's really that. I think Gary said it best. If that you had that flat roof portion wasn't there, this would be fine, and I don't think we'd be having this discussion. So, not to say that has to go away, but how do you incorporate it into the design so it's not so jarring?
All right, thanks, Brad. Any other comments before we wrap up? All right, then who wants to make the motion? And it sounds like we're moving towards a denial, so
Yeah.
You'll have to think about how to phrase this if you would like to make that the motion.
And also which design guidelines.
Correct, yes. Because the staff brief is referencing design guidelines towards an approval.
I feel like I stirred the pot, so I should try and make a motion here.
Thanks, Graham.
Sure, let me scribble for 2 seconds.
In the interim, this might be a signal to us as we start revising guidelines. Alleys are going to become more important, almost like corner lots if there's going to be ADUs on them, and what we need to do about it.
Yep,
that's a strong.
There's always something interesting in the alleys, right? But a different, anyway. I will try a motion, Madam Chair, and I move to deny application number 2021-COA-431 for the ADU at 3250 Bryant Street as per design guidelines 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, and 4.19. Character defining features for the Potter Highlands Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thanks, Graham. Do we have a second? Thanks, Gary. Do you have to formally say it?
I second.
Yes, we should have it on recording. Thank you, Gary.
Thanks. All right, then I will call for the vote. George.
Aye.
Brad.
Aye.
Aaron.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Julie.
Aye.
Gary.
Aye.
Erica.
Aye.
Kelly. Nay. All right, so we have 7 ayes and 1 nay from Kelly, myself. Weird referring to myself in the third person. So the motion passes and the project is denied. So the applicant can work with staff to come up with another solution that meets the comments that were made today. All right, that's the last design review item on our agenda today. So we'll move into the discussion items. We've got 1 on our agenda. So I'll go ahead and announce that, and then staff will give a presentation about it. And then, so for this one, we are actually having the applicant present as well, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
And I've just promoted her and made her co-host so she can start sharing her screen when Kelly, you're done with this part.
Gotcha. I just wanted to make sure because I don't think that was on this process list. But we will hear from the applicant about it, and then we can discuss after that. So our discussion item today is about Civic Center Park. And so can go ahead and move forward with that. And please start with your name and address for the record. You have up to 10 minutes.
Just a clarification, they're discussing actually 2 different project scopes. So we've given them 20 minutes because they have,
oh, okay.
So they'll have 20 minutes because they're covering multiple projects that they're presenting to get feedback on.
Gotcha. So no staff presentation and
No,
20
I
minutes
think
to the applicant.
Yeah, they can go ahead and jump in, I think. I mean, so basically they're here today to kind of discuss the process so far. And while they're still in this design phase, to want to get feedback from the commission on then, you know, moving forward to final design proposals, which will come to you in the future.
Great. Thank you for the clarification, Abby. This is a little abnormal for our discussion items. Normally the discussion items are things that we just have on kind of the horizon for landmarks. So
and just FYI, Emily's moving folks over. So the applicant team is on their way in.
And so Jen, will you be keeping track of time? Okay.
Yeah.
And just as they're moving people over, there is a large team. Only a few of them will be presenting, but they did bring along a large team so that they're trying to have, that they could answer any questions the commission might have. So there's a lot of people around to hopefully be able to, answer any questions that you may have after the presentation.
Great. All right, whenever you're ready, go ahead and get started.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having us. I wasn't sure if I can turn my video on or not. I'm seeing a black box, but let me see.
You have your cover on?
No, I don't. Okay, that's all right. No need to see my face. But I am here. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for including us in the agenda today as a discussion item. We are absolutely thrilled to be here to discuss Civic Center, the Next 100 concept design project, which includes improvements to Civic Center Park, Bannock Street, and Bannock Street in front of the City and County building. My name is Jenna Harris. I am a landscape architect and the Denver Parks and Recreation project manager for this very large Civic Center Next 100 project. I am joined here today by an amazing project team that includes Wank Associates, who is leading the concept design for the areas in Civic Center Park, as well as Livable City Studio, who is leading the design team for the Bannock Street Transformation Project. In addition, I want to recognize our project partners, the Civic Center Conservancy and Denver's Department of Transportation Infrastructure, both of whom are also represented here with us today. So the Civic Center Next 100 project actually includes 4 areas within Civic Center. So we have a lot to cover today. I'm going to try to be as brief as I can. And I want you to all know that there has been a lot of thoughts and effort going into this work. And we have a larger recording from our public meeting that typically takes us an hour to present. But we're going to cover this just as quickly as we can for you today. So first off, the Greek Theater is a project that is funded by the Elevate Denver Bond. The goal of that project is to enliven the Greek Theater to become a premier outdoor performance venue for the city of Denver. The central gathering feature, which includes a new 3-dimensional artistic element aligned along the central promenade, will become a new space in the heart of the park. This project will actually follow a separate call to artist process, so we will not be discussing that project here today. But we will also be discussing the Central Promenade, which links the Greek Theater and Voorhees Memorial, which will continue to be a unified space that's a critical link within the park and better accommodate both events and daily use. Bannock Street is the recently closed area between Colfax and 14th Avenue and will be reimagined as a permanent public gathering space in front of the City and County building. While we've combined these 4 areas for purposes of receiving public input and creating a cohesive concept design, I think as was mentioned in the beginning, the final concept plan for each of these projects will eventually break out into its own final design and construction schedule. Each project will be reviewed again by this group, the Landmark Preservation Commission, again at 30% design. So I think I speak on behalf of the entire team when I say that it's truly been an honor and a privilege to work together to imagine the next 100 years of our city's crown jewel park and first National Historic Landmark. The concept design has been driven by the 2005 Civic Center Master Plan, as well as the 2009 Design Guidelines, of which our incredible consultant team have become extremely well-versed in these guiding documents, and our concept design is deeply grounded within. In addition to the master plan and design guidelines as drivers of the design, we have also undergone an extensive public engagement effort over the last 9 months. We've hosted 3 public workshops. At each milestone, we've also hosted focus groups, stakeholder advisory committee meetings, as well as technical meetings. Currently, we have a public survey open from the 3rd and final public workshop that we hosted 2 weeks ago. The full presentation is available from that. And I just want to remind the commission that public comment is still open on that for until October 18th. So while obviously it's up to the commission to take public comment today, there is another avenue for public comment that we'd encourage members of the public to take as well. So over the course of the public engagement process, we've had thousands of unique touch points with the public and stakeholders to gather their feedback. We've also worked extensively with multiple city agencies and key stakeholders, including DOTI, CPD, Arts and Venues, the Office of Special Events, the Mayor's Office, and General Services. That's all to say our consultant team has really synthesized an incredible amount of feedback, research, and oftentimes contradictory viewpoints, which has resulted in a concept design that we're extremely excited to share with you today. While we understand that typically the Landmark Commission would want to review designs at 30%, we've noted the public significance of this project and have worked with Abby and Jen to speak with you while still at the concept phase of this project. As I mentioned, we just hosted our third and final public workshop where we presented a preferred concept option based on the feedback we've received so far. We're here to present that to you today. And it's the same preferred option that was shared with the public. We see this Landmark Commission meeting as another important stakeholder meeting in our process. We're really excited to get your feedback today on the preferred concept options. We will be refining what you see today and sharing with the public via email correspondence later this fall the final concept plan. Please note that the design details of all of the concepts will continue to evolve as we enter final design. All of the concept designs are truly at an initial concept level, and that leads me to what we are hoping to gain from you from today's discussion. A general gut check of the concept plan, that it's within the Civic Center master plan and design guideline guidance, any concept level feedback as we continue to refine the concept plan this fall, and any notes as we enter final design for continued refinement of design details. So thank you so much again for your design, your time and your input. We look forward to the conversation. I'll now hand it over to the WANK team to walk you through the Civic Center Park concept.
Thanks, Jenna. Can everyone hear me? Good. I think you all know these are some photos of the central promenade going through the park that connect the Voorhees and the Greek Theater. If you want to just scan ahead, the Greek Theater as it is today. And our goal for this project really is, Megan, on the next slide, you see this image of the Greek Theater in the 1920s being a community event performance space. And our goal is to really continue that legacy, the cultural history of Denver, by utilizing the Greek as an outdoor performance venue, making it more usable and accessible for both performers and daily users. And so I'm going to have Natalie go through some of the design guidelines that we're holding ourselves to as we're thinking about the new elements in the park.
All right, thanks everybody. The design guidelines, again, were adopted on March 17th, 2009 as an update to that 2005 master plan. The 2005 park master plan was where the datum for the building heights in the park was identified, and that was to match the McNichols building at 70 feet. In the design guidelines, however, there are the following outlined items. So it provided the modification to the Greek Theater may be considered as a new element to the park. It allowed modifications that provide universally acceptable routes through the park. It encouraged the continued use of the Greek Theater as a premier performance venue, and allowed for the protection from sun and provide a shade feature. So the image on your left is from the design guidelines, and the gray hatches depict areas identified for new elements within the park. So continuing, the guidelines also outlines subordinate modifications and mass and scale to the Greek as not to obscure any facade or architectural detailing, retaining the original views into and from the park, and retain the original views of the cultural axis. Apologies. Ensure that any modifications are equal to or match the design excellence of the Greek Theater, and modifications should be compatible yet clearly of its own time. And one of our biggest ones was ensure the modifications do not attach to or impact the Greek Theater or its features, ensuring that any ancillary features are removable with no impact to the historic fabric. Also, the allowance of contemporary materials complementing the park's original materials, but being compatible with neoclassical designs. So as we started to work through solutions for the project, We realized there was a slight conflict that required finding a balance of subordination while preserving the iconic views and ensuring that our new elements did not attach to or impact the Greek theater in a way that was not reversible. So where we landed was combining the performance venue infrastructure needs with the shade element. And our strategy was to provide a light canopy that touches down outside the Greek theater completely, framing it in a way that does not obscure any of the facades and retains those historic and iconic views. So we recognize that while the 2005 master plan outlined the Statum F that you see in the diagram, through our public process, we looked at several ways of how to incorporate the various infrastructure and operational needs, but we realized that in order to enhance the park without visually cluttering or detracting from the historic grandeur, we really needed to go up. So we found this new datum line that we're showing here at G, and this allows us to really satisfy the guideline in nearly every manner. In a way that our team and our outreach partners all find to be a great enhancement to the Greek, not only for performances, but for everyday experience of the park.
Thanks, Natalie. And so as we get to this, we did go to the public with two concepts for both the stage and the canopy. And you can see the survey results here that there was a strong preference from the public input for the larger stage and the larger shade canopy. And really that came down to on the shade canopy being able to be adaptable for everyday events, where concept one was a much smaller stage. The setup and tear down of that structure to be able to leave the Greek theater open raised a lot of concerns because it would have to be closed off for 2 days at a time to be able to do that setup. And it also, like Natalie just talked about, created some visual disturbance with the columns to the actual structure. Concept two was a larger structure that provided shade for the performer and for the audience. And this was really well liked when through our Greek theater focus group, which was composed of a lot of people who, community organizers, event producers that would use this space, that having a ring truss that could have the AV system, lighting hooked up to that made it much more usable from a standpoint of people being able to set up and more people being able to use it. We also, the stage, this concept was liked because it was larger and allows the ramp to go all the way around the front side while still preserving the historic stairs on the side. So this ramp kind of sits over those historic steps and it's reversible if it ever needed to come out. The stairs are still there. And we also talked about really wanting to have a welcoming plaza and a connection to 14th Avenue and providing accessibility that way. So as I skip through, I know we're short on time, kind of skipping through these, we're really thinking about activating the Greek theater from morning to night, not impacting the historic structure. So you see in this image how it touches down on both sides, keeping drainage away from the Greek theater itself, and the columns not being set in the bowl, but outside of it. What you also see in this image is the eclectic skyline of the cultural district behind, of the art museum and the library, and that we're really starting to connect into that eclectic district along the cultural axis. These images show really, you know, the past and community groups that used to perform here, and our goal is to activate the Greek theater again, to really make this a place where community events happen, that it's a destination, that trust system that comes up above is a place where lights can be hung, the AV system can be hung, and nothing is touching the historic Greek theater itself because we're spanning across it. The structure today is, if you go to the next slide, Megan, is inaccessible, and because of all of the terraces and the stairs that exist. we're proposing at the openings to create ramps. So we're not creating any new openings, but the blue lines show where we are bringing ADA access through the colonnade, through the balustrade. And we have some exciting options that we were really pushed by our Greek theater group to bring access through to the backside. Natalie, I might take this one just to keep it. I'm seeing our clock. What we wanted to do here for access, and you see this in the image on the right, is the ramp coming through. What you see on the left side is how we're proposing to do this. So there are two stones there, that the historic stones that we're proposing to take out and put a ramp. So we're preserving the existing stairs on the side and bringing ADA access through the Greek Theater, which connects to 14th Avenue. And one of the things that we're really excited about this, and as we got pushed by our focus group, was thinking about the Gang of 19 and celebrating the historics, the heroes of the park. And so the Gang of 19 was where 19 people laid down in Civic Center Park to get on buses that really sprang the ADA movement that started here in Denver, and how we can have this historic structure that we are modifying to help honor those stories of what people were trying to accommodate. And I think that's really exciting and has gained a lot of excitement through our public process. Keeping this as an open plaza, the 2005 master plan allowed us to open this up to have a wider plaza than what we have today. So we're moving trees to the outside, and what that does is really celebrates the structure itself, that you can see it more. It allows for the green room spaces to be set up here and moved out, and really makes this a stronger connection to 14th, across 14th, to the art museum. Next slide is the Central Promenade. And so the Central Promenade, the design guidelines really don't allow us to do a whole lot here, except to bring more infrastructure in and to preserve the historic paving pattern, to keep it as an adaptable event corridor and a comfortable pedestrian space. So what we are proposing for the Central Promenade, not placing any major features, but really thinking about a strategy to have temporary structures that could be removed that allow for lighting. So these are poles that are set 60 feet on center. The historic lighting is still there. It allows this light canopy to be hung across the promenade seasonally, or to have banners hang across there, but we are keeping those views to the Greek very open. Thinking about permeable pavers that match the historic paving pattern to be able to provide stormwater infiltration in the park itself, and how that works in winter. So if the Chris Kindle Market is set up, those electrical connections that are at the base of the poles allow generators to not have to be in the park, that there is this more adaptable space for events to happen.
So unfortunately, it looks like we have only 2 minutes left for Bannock. Is there ever an occasion where we could extend the time slightly to cover the rest of this? My apologies on the timing. You can see there's a lot to cover.
Jen, what's
at your discretion?
Since it's a discussion item, we don't typically have like timelines like this, like we would for design review, right?
Right, yeah, it's at your discretion if you'd like to extend it. I think, are we talking a few minutes? Are we
like
talking
5
a half hour?
minutes? Would 5 minutes be good?
Yeah, an additional 5 minutes would be great, and I'll still go fast.
Okay. All right, let's increase it 5 minutes.
Thank you, guys. So I think everybody knows Bannock and the previous conditions upper left, when it was a roadway, and the current kind of phase 1 closure with a mural here. But as we're looking at the developing the concept design for Bannock, it was really balancing a number of objectives, and I'll go through kind of the planning guidance, but also balancing the event needs, the way that Bannock functions today, and making this really an extension of the park and making it very people oriented, and also functions kind of as that bike and ped corridor in and out of downtown. So the planning guidance, we have kind of done a deep dive into all these documents. So in addition to the Civic Center master planning guidelines, there is the outdoor downtown plan and Denver Moves, which identifies this as a key corridor. So some of the major influences, it's that the strong relationship between Civic Center Park and the city and county building, strengthening that civic access, enhancing the grand entry to the city and county building, and making Bannock more pedestrian oriented and part of the overall kind of civic fabric. So I'll go through these quickly. Actually, I'm just going to skip this slide for time purposes. We understand where it sits in the area of influence. And interestingly, this graphic kind of shows how the city and county building plaza extends across Bannock into Civic Center Park. Next. And really the activity nodes and how 14th and Colfax have become key gateways into the park, as well as the city and county building plaza. So we've considered all of this through our design work, which I'll share in just a moment, but we're going to flip through a few quick slides first. Connectivity and circulation. Obviously, Bannock, really the focus is making it more pedestrian oriented, and the paths shown within the park in orange, kind of connecting those into the city and county building, and not having Bannock as such a divider. As far as the vegetation and plantings, as we were working through Bannock, it was really thinking about how do we kind of restore and enhance some of those original tree patterns within the park, especially along the great lawn there shown on the bottom image, and carrying that through Bannock, and then also thinking about kind of the understory and garden plantings to provide more of a human scale. The lower terrace is also a key feature of the guidelines, and this graphic here shows how that extends across Bannock and creates that grand entry into the city and county building, connecting it to the park and improving and really reinforcing that civic access. And so all this was taken into account as we were working through our concept design. And if you want to flip to the next slide, I'll share with you where we are today. So the idea here is really that Bannock creates a grand entry to the city and county building, and has the addition of an interactive water feature in that central plaza space, garden rooms, and a bike and pedestrian promenade through it. If you flip to the next slide, you can see how we've started to organize it around these three key spaces that I just mentioned, that really balance kind of civic needs and everyday needs. Go ahead and flip to the next slide. This just shows how we've reinforced that civic access and the paths within Civic Center Park, connecting them to the plaza space and to the city and county building, really making this a grand entry that the guidelines outlined. Within this space, we have kind of on the bottom there, an interactive water feature that really honors this and kind of celebrates this access. We also have another scrim water feature, and you can see the images on the right of the screen and the character of those. The paving materials extend throughout this space, and really connecting the city and county building plaza with this Bannock Central Plaza, and drawing people into the space and into the park. This is a view of that water feature and how it is kind of reinforces that civic access, and that view to the city and county building, really making it a place for people every day. And pulling out a little bit, you can see how this space is really alive 18 hours a day. And so the city and county building, as we all know, gets great lighting. The intent is that Bannock would be, there would be great lighting along Bannock as well, really bringing it to life, making it a place for people. But we've also thought about how the space functions for these big events like it does today. And so we've worked hard to accommodate kind of the spatial needs of events. And you can see here how the water feature can be turned off and a stage can be placed in the center area, making it a great place for large civic gatherings. As we look at the bike and pedestrian promenade, this serves kind of service needs, event needs, access to the park, but we also have a pedestrian path that gets people into the city and county building, making sure we're addressing ADA access. So a few quick slides here, just visualizing what that looks and feels like. So not only is it for bikes and peds walking through, but it's really a place for gathering and kind of everyday enjoyment, as well as various civic needs around the park. You can see here how festivals can be accommodated within the space, and we've sized it in such a way that we can have festivals and also places for people to move through and to linger as well. And the garden rooms, these are on that kind of eastern edge right next to the park. And these are really spaces for gathering, relaxation, and enjoyment. And if you go to the next view, you can see how we have varied spaces, some elevated and gardens with native plantings, stormwater collection, really kind of extending the park into the space and softening kind of that landscape and carrying the trees through this space as well. And the last slide, the gateways along 14th and Colfax. So the idea here is that there are future gateway elements that really draw people to the park.
Thank you. I think time's up. Great.
Thank you for the extra time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, this is a unique, normally we don't have discussion items of this nature and it's exciting, but I think with how unique this is, it warranted some extra time to get through it. And of course, we all got your materials as well and have reviewed those. So we're prepared to discuss that. All right. Since I did mention earlier, there was a question as to whether we would allow for public comment, and I said that we would. I guess I'll call for public comments at this time. Please use the hand raise button if you have a comment.
Brad Cameron has his hand up. Let me switch the amount of time. Brad, you're welcome to unmute. You'll have 2 minutes.
Hi there, I can't tell. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi there. I was involved with the design guidelines back in 2009. And my main comment, I'll just focus, is on the canopy for the Greek theater. I think you folks really need to dig out the actual wording. I think what you saw in the presentation was a summary of some of them. When they talk about the need for there to be any modifications needed to be subordinate to the mass and scale of the Greek theater and respect the architectural scale of Civic Center and the Greek theater, and to retain the original views of the cultural access. And my concern is that as proposed, this canopy really is simply overpowering for the Greek theater and really detracts from the symmetry of the cultural access and really just pretty much out of scale. So that basically in a nutshell would be my concern. And I think you folks really need to dive into those guidelines from 2009 and consider them when you look at that proposed sunshade or whatever they're calling it. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. And I don't think we got your address. We require address for
I live at
or name.
1200 Humboldt, 1200 Humboldt Street. My name is Brad Cameron.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Keith, you can unmute yourself when you're ready. We'll need name and address as
well. Keith Pryor, 2418 Champa Street, Denver, Colorado 80205. I would definitely echo Brad's.
I'm sorry, Keith, it looks like we're having a poor connection.
And comments, Civic Center, the shade canopy. Better? Yes, no? Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. So yes, I'd just like to echo Brad's piece about the design guidelines and having that shade structure be subordinate. And it really is too massive. And I understand what we're trying to do is provide shade so that we can activate that. It is a very hot condition in the summer, but it blocks not only the cultural access, it really dominates the Greek theater. It does not let the Greek theater itself be the focal point. The canopy becomes the focal point. And then it also blocks the eclectic Point C building as well as the Denver Library, which really creates a nice collection of buildings that you can see. And that canopy will be blocking that and again, becoming the focal element. And as in most landmark structures, when you're doing an addition or you're doing an alteration, the addition or alteration should always be subordinate to the primary structure, and this is not. And so it definitely needs to be further studied. I think some of the other concepts work well, but this one is definitely one that needs a lot more work, and it definitely needs to be subordinate. And we need to figure out how to really preserve the view planes and to really celebrate the amphitheater and not distract from it, which this canopy does. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
I don't see anyone else with their hands raised, no.
Great. Okay, then we'll go ahead and move into discussion in Q&A. So yeah, Gary, do you want to kick it off? You're on mute.
See that. I'm wondering whether what the sequence is. Do we have, are we mixing discussion and Q&A together, or are we going to segregate them somehow?
I think that since this is a discussion item, Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, but since it's a discussion item, we can just openly, you know, ask this applicant team, you know, about things because we're not making a motion today on anything.
Well, I have a question and I will have comments too, but my question is, how does the, or how do the 2009 design guidelines relate to the National Historic Landmark designation, which occurred in 2013? I'm wondering if anyone can answer, did the landmark designation make reference to those 2009 guidelines as being somehow accommodated, or just what's the relationship?
That is a great question, Gary, and I'm not 100% aware of the answer. I'm curious if the staff is aware, or if Natalie may be aware as our historic preservation specialist.
Yeah, that's a great question, Gary. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to look into it.
To piggyback on Gary's question, you know, are you going through the State Historic Preservation Officer for review on all of this as well, since it is a National Historic Landmark, or are you not using any federal funding to work on this?
We're not currently using any federal funding to work on this, but if there is additional levels of a review that we're not aware of that should be part of this process, we're happy to include those. We have had members of the State Historic Preservation Office on some of our committees as we've gone through the concept design because of how early we are in the process. But that's really why we wanted to touch base with you guys, is we want to make sure we're within all of the guidelines and all of the advice that we need to move forward with this project.
Yeah, this is Erica. I would just add to that the National Park Service Intermountain Regional staff is probably someone you should have as a stakeholder because of the NHL status. They don't necessarily have you know, purview to say what you should or shouldn't do, but they do provide technical expertise as part of the NHL status. And I think it would be wise to make use of their expertise and get any feedback early on as far as how designs may or may not affect the National Historic Landmark status. I will say that I read the draft of the NHL years ago. I don't recall it discussing in any great detail the 2009 design guidelines, but of course that would be good to verify.
Yeah, and Erica, to answer that, we have had someone from the National Park Service on our committees as well. But to your point, it's been more at a conceptual level review, and we've had, a lot of public feedback at this point, and we're transitioning from more of the concept design, programming, public input to more of a technical final design. And so how we integrate that in the next steps will be pretty critical.
Yeah, Gary.
I think my biggest concern is the shade structure, and I think that's already come up. And I keep thinking about Soldier Field in Chicago, whose National Historic Landmark status was revoked after the alterations there. And it seems to me that the scale of the shade structure relative to the Greek theater is similar to the intrusion of what happened at Soldier Field, even though Soldier Field, much bigger structure. I really would hate to see any kind of alterations that would actually negate the National Historic Landmark status. And that status was revoked by the director of the National Park Service back in 2006. So I think that's a big concern. The other concern I have is that the shade structure looks relatively light. And that I think and I noticed there's at least one engineer listening to all this. Once all the dynamics are applied to the design of that structure, having had some experience with similar tension structures, everything seems to get a lot heavier, and it could be even more overshadowing or obtrusive than what the early renderings kind of show. So I think the shade structure is a legitimate concern regarding this early proposal.
Thanks, Gary. We definitely don't want to do anything that would revoke our National Historic Landmark status, so don't worry. We won't be getting to that point.
Since we're discussing the canopy, it might be easier for the sake of conversation to maybe continue if commissioners have any other questions or thoughts on the canopy. Maybe let's just start with the Greek theater, and then we can move on to the central promenade and keep moving through the areas to kind of organize our thoughts. Erica?
I did have another comment about the Greek theater, but not so much about the canopy. So if we want to still talk about the canopy, I can wait.
Yeah, maybe we should just check in. So we've heard two people kind of say that they have some concerns about the canopy in addition to the public comments we received. Does everyone kind of have that same concern? You can either nod your head or weigh in.
I'll jump in. This discussion reminds me of when we were talking about the stage alterations at Red Rocks the last couple years, which could be useful for the consultant team to kind of look at what was explored and discussed there, because some of that also had to do with the mass of it and the lightness, or really the materiality, and how what materials are ultimately selected could impact it visually or not. So I'm not opposed to the proposed shade structure because it's just a concept still, and we don't know the materiality of it. We don't know how structurally it would attach to the ground plane yet, or how much it would project up above. So, I mean, from a standpoint of its impact to the site, I think the overall concept 2 would be less intrusive than the posts that would go down in the middle of the stage, which is a conversation we also had at Red Rocks, because again, you know, that's a very significant landmark that we didn't want to see negatively impacted. The one other comment I have on the shade structure, and if, you know, it would block any views beyond, well, those views of the buildings we have now were not there when this was constructed. So I'm not overly concerned about the view shed being altered, because the view shed of 2021 is not the view shed of the 1920s. You know, so I think that's all right. But I think the materiality and structure will go a long ways to understanding what the impacts this are. And the team's just not there yet.
Thanks, Erin. George, did you have a comment?
Just that I like the canopy simply because if you stood out there in July or August, you're going to be craving some shade. And as far as the focus on the Greek, it frames it. It focuses you almost like a tunnel right to the Greek theater. It will disappear when there's something going on at the theater, I'm sure. So I have no objections to the canopy.
I want to follow up one thing with what George said too, that goes with the functionality. Is one of the best ways to preserve these spaces is to have them used in a positive manner by the public. And as everybody's seen how Civic Center Park's been used throughout the summer, having, you know, 18-hour presence by the general community is going to help preserve this space, I believe, in the long term, rather than it becoming a further homeless enclave, which,
if the general community will even go there.
yeah, I mean, and you know, the best way to preserve something is to care for it and love it, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Erin, and actually what everybody said. I think they're all really good comments. I understand why you kind of created that new datum line, and I think it made sense to me after, you know, after it was explained, mainly because I think if you built a canopy in front of the Greek theater from a pedestrian standpoint, lower than that datum, then you are blocking the view of the top of the Greek theater, whereas having the canopy above it from a pedestrian level, you could see it better. So I think that really made sense to me. I mean, when I first saw the image, I was kind of like, ooh, is that subordinate? Is it not? But you do see it more with it above. But I would echo the concerns that Gary and Erica mentioned, that I would hate to, I definitely wouldn't want to approve anything that would negate the NHL status.
Absolutely. And I don't know, should I just wait for comments to add anything to it?
No, you can
Okay.
jump in, since it's not like a design review project. I think it's just general discussion.
Great. And yeah, we did consider all those things, and we looked at shade structures that were lower, kind of in line with or below the cornice of the Greek. And we came to that same conclusion of just, it doesn't preserve those view sheds. It sort of blocks pieces and parts. As a premier venue, there's a lot of requirements as far as performances go for equipment, for lighting, for speakers. So how do we hide those things and not attach them to the actual physical structure of the Greek in a way that would be visually impactful? So that was kind of how we came to our solution. And again, we're trying to condense, you know, months worth of work into 10 minutes of explanation. But yes, we do appreciate everybody's comments and thoughts, and we will continue to think about it as we refine.
Great.
If I could just add too, I really appreciate Erin's comments specifically about activation as an act of historic preservation. I think as we've gone through the research, there are hundreds of amazing photos of all sorts of events, performances, community gatherings that have been hosted at Civic Center over the last 100 years. And I think our goal is really to continue to activate Civic Center Park in a contemporary way as best we can and not impact the structure. And so we've heard from a lot of community groups about the cost impacts of performances at the Greek Theater, where people have to bring in their own equipment every single time because, you know, they can't attach to the Greek Theater. And so we really want to provide a venue that you know, hosts the community in a way that it has in the past. And we're really excited about that potential, but it's obviously balancing the needs of, not creating something that's so small that still requires the community to bring in their own equipment.
Yeah, that makes sense. So for the sake of time, maybe we move on to other elements about the Greek theater. Erica, you mentioned that you had some other comments.
Yeah, just a small comment. And again, I know we're at the concept phase here, but I guess I'll just say as an aside, I'm excited to see the recognition of the accessibility movement history here. I think that's really cool. Having known that was going on in the 70s, but recognizing it and having it part of what you're doing, I think is a great thing to incorporate that social history. But I guess I was looking at the ramp element that you have from 14th down to the stage, and that you're making it kind of central, cutting it through the existing stairs there. I don't have an issue with that necessarily, but I guess as it's portrayed now, it's kind of this solid wall. And I think I would encourage you to think more kind of transparent, of some kind of railing or something that is a little more open, doesn't feel quite as like it's part of the original monumental Greek theater design. And I guess I would say that kind of generally, I think that applies not only to the canopy, but anything else that you're doing when it comes to the theater, recognizing that stone, that monumentality from its original design should be distinguished from new elements that not only respect it in size, but also allow that to be seen even on the small scale.
Definitely. And I think that was one thing that we really wanted to look at. There will be an element of retention as far as taking out those center stones and making sure we can create a retaining feature that'll make the ramp possible, and also for drainage and whatnot, but those details are still very early. So we will work through those.
I think those were great comments, Erica, and I would echo that. I think it's really exciting. I think you came up with some really good solutions for providing accessibility in here, and I appreciate the kind of symmetry was respected and the original openings were respected. I think that was very successful. I was a little surprised that the community preferred, I think it was concept 2 for the stage, because that was the one element that I felt didn't necessarily respect the symmetry that is everywhere else throughout the Greek theater. I felt concept 1 was a little more successful in that, and it seemed to me as though you were providing accessibility elsewhere. Would that ramp in the middle really be necessary? I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, but that was just my initial thought, is that the symmetry is so strong in these, traditional classical elements. And so I thought that would be something that I'd like to see in the stage as well. But I do like that it's reversible and that the stairs are underneath it. And so I appreciate that.
I can respond to that just in terms of why I think when we were early on with that concept, we did not have the accessibility through the back side. And so that was the only accessible way without a lift to get onto the stage at that point in the design. But it was also, I do think you do have access points at other places, but because of the alcoves and the change of grade there, the movement from the promenade through without going all the way around is really that stage point. So I think that gives supporting reason to it. It also, the larger stage had better use for the symphony and dance performances. So when you're thinking about the types of events that could occur here, it actually provided even more opportunity than the small, even though the other one was still large, the extended stage, this option of the stage in the round had more potential for all kinds of events.
Gotcha.
Which I think when we're thinking historically in terms of the purpose of the Greek theater and the community and dance and Mariachi Friday and all the things that this might be, the flexibility of having everything possible was liked by the public and by the focus group.
If I
And
can
also,
add one other note as well. We didn't get to speak to it, but part of the justification for the larger size and the round form, the current stage, which sits right about here, is not visible from any point along the colonnade. These are fabulous spaces within the structure itself, but really are not able to be to interface with the stage performance itself. So this larger stage does draw that stage action out into the bowl. So these colonnades, without any alterations to the colonnades themselves, they're now viable viewing areas, performance space, much more integrated with the performance action as well.
Yeah,
so
I'd also, sorry, I'll just quickly say that I actually liked this concept better than the other one, and I was looking at why was that, and I think it's because it rather than kind of eating up the original stairs that are there, it sits further out and allows us to see elements of those stairs still, and so it feels like we can recognize it as contemporary, I guess, rather than the concept one, which is just kind of, I'm not finding the right words, but it's just incorporated too much, I guess, into it. I think there could still be, when it comes to symmetry, which Kelly's absolutely right to point out that that's a successful part of the other elements that you've talked about with the theater, and that, you know, that could still be something that you achieve through this. If accessibility is achieved through other places, you don't necessarily need that asymmetrical ramp that goes up the side, although it's you know, very elegant looking. So anyways, I actually think I prefer this kind of standing a little further proud of the original steps so that we can see it, and it's just have a better sense of maybe pieces of what this stage had been.
yeah, and just to
Another
jump
thing-
in a little bit about all the considerations that went into how we would travel through this space. So one is the everyday use, right, of the gateway of people coming from the library or the art museum down through the park or the opposite direction. So being able to take a stroller, take a wheelchair through the center of the bowl up through the gateway was part of it. Also thinking about how the stage might be used in different ways. So coming from the audience up to the stage, this ramp really provides that access without having to go around the building and in if you were having like a graduation or something where people would come up from below. And then also, yeah, just making sure that we were providing access without kind of complications of lifts or temporary things that would have to come in and out, and making it a fun park feature. That was also one of the big, Nicole can talk about that much better than me, but inspiring delight and things like that.
Yeah, I was also thinking about that, this round stage feature here as its use in everyday, not for performances, but this feels like a much safer design to me from a user perspective than even how it is now, where people are often tucked back in there, kind of hidden. And here it kind of pushes everything out visible, where, you know, people can hang out or walk down through the promenade, and it's kind of presents everything in a safer manner. I feel like a psychological safety.
That's a great point, Erin, and one that we haven't said explicitly, but I think people have really responded to. Adding on to Natalie's comment about, you know, all the different directions of movement, Civic Center and the Greek Theater specifically is such an important First Amendment space for our city. And so you can imagine at a rally, someone needing to come up from the audience in a wheelchair, and that becoming really awkward if they have to go all the way around the Greek Theater. So adding the maximum number of ADA accessible locations has become really a priority for this project.
Yeah, that's great. Any other comments about the Greek Theater before we move to the Central Promenade? Or that's what we're calling it, right? Central gathering feature, sorry.
No, it is Central Promenade. We didn't, the gathering feature we didn't
Oh, that's
share
right. That's
because that
separate.
one is gonna go to, it's gonna go to an RFP to get an artist on board.
Gotcha.
We'll be back for that one at a later date.
Great.
You know,
All right.
Kelly, I just have one comment as we move off of the kind of the Greek theater. So conceptually, I like everything that's going on. I think it's really interesting, and it's doing everything the way it should be done. I think that as it starts to get developed, there are things that are necessary, like handrails and guardrails, and how do those start to play into it? Because conceptually, this is this very pure, simple idea. There's the sight lines are perfect, but then there's the reality of what we're trying to do, and how that gets folded into it is going to be probably one of your biggest challenges. So I think that's something you guys are probably thinking about it, but I just put it out there because it would be drastically different if some of these components started to have railings and everything kind of in the foreground instead of in the background. So thinking about how those elements come together.
I think that's a great point, Brad. And, you know, it would could detract from how, you know, it seems to touch the historic nature so lightly right now. And if things start to obscure that, like handrails and such, that could have a huge impact. I'd also, you know, think about just, can you provide cane detection and have those steps be used so that you're not meeting those thresholds where code would require you to put a handrail, you know? So I don't know, looking at that once you get into the details will be really crucial, I think. Good point. All right, so commissioners, any comments for the team about the Central Promenade?
No, can you guys bring the pictures up again, please?
I know, I went through that one so fast. Because I knew we had so much more to get to.
I had one question off the top of my head. You had mentioned that, so I think the poles to provide electrical, that all made sense. I think that's great. You know, as they are conceptually, they're kind of identified as new, which makes sense. But I was curious about, you know, replacing the historic paving with permeable pavers. Would permeable pavers really look like this, where they're so tight together with small joints, or would they actually kind of have a different perception from what's there currently?
Megan, do you want to jump in on some of this? I know
Sure.
we've done
Yeah.
some research on trying to look at materials to match. Megan, I'll let you go first and I'll add on to your comments.
Well, it's the most important thing to note is the current paving is actually poured concrete with these brick inlays, and the concrete was poured at a pedestrian rated thickness. The bricks are standard pedestrian bricks, and so it's just been getting hammered by the amount of events that are out there. Just general basic maintenance is tearing up those that pavement, and we're seeing differential settling between the two different materials. So the initial want behind going to a single concrete unit paver is it's a single material to cover the entire promenade that still matches the same look of what's out there, the uncolored concrete that makes up the background, and then the brick red within those tiles. We don't yet know exactly how much of the promenade could be permeable versus non. It would not be the entire width of it, just based on the infrastructure that's sitting within the promenade. But we were able to find a standard permeable paver unit that is truck rated, large heavy truck rated, that would match the existing herringbone of the brick. Obviously, it's not matching a poured concrete as it would be a unit paver. But I think that you bring up a good question about joint sizing, and that would be something that would definitely need to be considered carefully so that it feels really consistent across the entire width, knowing we may be altering between an impermeable and a permeable cross section at various points within the promenade.
Yeah, thank you. That makes sense. And obviously that's kind of a detailed question, but that was my only concern is, will it be perceived very differently? And I totally forgot that is all concrete with a brick inlay there. And so I guess that does bring up another comment that I have, which is just trying to make sure that the transition between the new permeable pavers and the sidewalks would be, you know, I would just, since there'll be a change in material, I think matching that Civic Center concrete, because it's not a standard gray concrete color, it is a tinted color. I think that would need to be matched very well to kind of keep with the historic pathways.
I think it's worth more study in the next phase. I think the permeable, in order to do anything for stormwater, we can't add gardens to the promenade or stormwater gardens or anything. So it really is our only opportunity as we're thinking about sustainability for the next 100 years. So that's really where we kind of put the effort, but knowing that there's a lot of details to be figured out with that one yet.
Yeah. Any other comments from the commissioners about the central promenade? Nope. Everybody thinks the concept looks good. Great. Let's go to Bannock. Awesome. You've got it up here. What were the thoughts on Bannock?
I have to be cheeky and say I miss my shortcut for when I'm late to meetings, but otherwise, no, I think it's great. I really, I liked how the different concepts engaged Civic Center with the city and county building, because those were always, I remember sitting there on the, you know, bleachers for the Parade of Lights and your back's to Civic Center and you're looking, you know, it just never has felt connected. And so I was excited to see that that the team looked at that, and I really appreciate that. All joking aside.
Great. Any other thoughts?
Everyone always gets so exhausted by the time we get to Bannock, so don't be shy.
Well,
yeah, Gary.
The making the park accessible, both between all the structures there and all the site features is really great. But how do people who have significant accessibility issues or challenges get to the park to enjoy the accessibility within the park? And there's just, the nearest parking is quite some distance away. And so I think one of the things that might be considered as this project proceeds into more detail as to providing, even if it's limited, but to provide some closer accessibility by vehicles for people who are disabled. And that's one of the things that removing Bannock Street from as a public thoroughfare, because there was parking along that street in front of the city and county building, and that opportunity is gone. So can this project somehow look at accommodating that loss in some way, even if it's just a handful of spaces? Because I think the nearest, there's some parking on 14th that is not designated for the disabled right now. The next nearest parking is the parking structure by the Art Museum. I just think it's something that if we're celebrating the accessibility within the park, which we should maybe try it a little bit harder to make the park itself more accessible for vehicles transporting disabled to this place.
Gary, that's a great point, and it's one that's come up in multiple meetings. I do think there was a gap between the Bannock Phase 1 closure where there was not new accessible parking yet on 14th Avenue, but there are multiple spaces now designated right adjacent to the city and county building for access into the building and the park. But I agree that additional spaces should be looked at surrounding the park.
Other comments on this design concept? I'd echo what Graham said. I think this is really exciting, and I love the idea of connecting the city and county building with the park. And I think this was a successful, in concept, I think this is a really successful way to do it by using both materiality and respecting kind of that access of the trees that flank the Great Lawn. So I like the direction that has been conceptualized. I just had one question, and that's, if we talk about, making other event spaces in the park, including, revitalizing the Greek Theater and making that easier for setup and performance. And now there's this, option here at Bannock where you had shown that events could be set up on top of the water feature when the water feature is not active. And so I was wondering, is there still access, since the McNichols building is an event venue, is there still vehicular access to the back of that building?
Yeah, I can explain that a little bit more. It's a good question. We do have access. I mean, the part of the idea behind the bike and pedestrian promenade is that it's sized in such a way where there's access for vehicles to get into the backside of McNichols, into the parking, as well as, food trucks that go into the park and along the central promenade. So that was a really kind of key part of that. While it will be, secured access, and, it's not open to everyday cars, you can kind of vaguely see it on this graphic where we'll have some sort of kind of retractable or hydraulic bollards that will grant that access so that people can get into, the plaza for event setup or the backside of McNichols.
Great. Any other questions or comments on this concept? No? Oh, Gary, yeah.
Well, this, I remember a number of years ago, I think this was when Daniel Liebeskind was in the design process for the museum. There was a scheme proposed to activate Civic Center Park. And there's quite a bit of controversy about what was proposed, but one of the, I wouldn't call it an argument, but a sort of a two-sided discussion that seemed to be underlying that was, is Civic Center Park a place that needs to be activated, or is it a respite from all the activity that occurs around the park and all the other buildings? And I'm wondering how that dichotomy is being addressed by this process. And just, the idea of 18-hour access, how many events a year are actually reasonable or conceivable or feasible, given the idea that there will be two sort of enhanced entertainment presentation venues incorporated into the park. Are some of the changes that are being proposed, as exciting visually as they might be, are they really over anticipating just how much public use for those kind of events might actually occur? I mean, is it one of those things, if we build it, they will come? Or is there a balance here between a restful, peaceful place in the middle of the city and an activated place that only gets activated, 10 10 times a year or something like that.
Yeah, Gary,
Go ahead, Meredith.
I'll jump into that. I think that you're hitting on kind of one of the biggest challenges that we've actually talked about through this whole process is that how do you create and design a space for these large events, for large events, for medium-sized events, for smaller events, but also making it a place for people. And I think that the space, and I'll just speak to Bannock specifically, it needs to be able to do everything. And so, we need to create places for people to kind of come and enjoy and gather on a daily basis, drawing from the surrounding context of Golden Triangle and downtown. We know this is a destination, and so that we need it to be able to kind of transform and function in that way as well. I think there is, plenty of space here where we can activate it, but people can also find places for respite and to get away. But what we do know about public spaces is that we need to have people there, and the more kind of people we get in the space, the more people will want to come because they will feel comfortable. And we also provide civic services around here, in many other places of the park today, and so we've thought about that for Bannock, and the way we'll kind of be accommodating some of that infrastructure in the design moving forward. So. I'm not sure there's kind of the perfect answer to your comment and question, except that I really think that we've done our best to balance the space so that we can accommodate all of those needs within the Bannock and kind of broader area.
Yeah, I would completely agree with Meredith and just reiterate that for really the entire park. Obviously, we're only looking at these 4 key areas of places where we can really activate and create a place of excitement and draw people in with new infrastructure and ways to host events and performances. But we have a very large park here with a lot of space for respite under trees and grassy lawn. Where the yellow, you could say, is the activation, and the blue for now is some of the respite. And 18 hours a day is a lot of time to activate a park. And we obviously don't have the capacity to do that at all times, but we're really excited about how these changes for the next 100 years can help us to better balance activation as well as respite from the city.
I'd like to just add that so far, I think Gary brings up an excellent point, but as far as activation versus respite, but so far what we've seen, I think, actually provides both, in that I think shade at the Greek Theater is one of the biggest reasons why it becomes so desolate at times of the day, because it is so exposed and hot. So I definitely understand the desire for shade, not only for events, but I think for just folks wanting to sit there on the steps. And the same goes for the garden rooms that you have along Bannock. I think those are actually a really great way to integrate the openness of the street and create a buffer into the park. So I it's one of those things where I don't have a magic 8 ball to know for sure how this is going to be used and perceived, but it seems like it's so far striking a good balance between those.
I agree. And I know that's not something that's like, I mean, you asked for a get check from us on how it's meeting the guidelines. And I know that we're kind of going a little above and beyond that, because I think it's because it looks like it is, if I could summarize maybe the commissioner's thoughts, it sounds like we're all kind of feeling, that conceptually this is doing a fairly good job of being consistent with the Civic Center guidelines, that, there are some concerns about the canopy at the Greek Theater the most, but the other areas seem pretty consistent, and it's exciting, which is probably why we have so much feedback. It's exciting for this to get activated. The only other thing, which again is kind of outside of our purview, but I just mentioned is, and I know you've gotten this feedback a lot in public comments, but with this activation, not having public restrooms in the park is a real hurdle. And so I'm not necessarily looking for you guys to answer that, but I'd echo the public's comments on that. And, I'd be interested to see how you guys address that, because if that's going to be a new built element, then that would be something that would be in our purview to, look at placement and height and design of that. So, yeah.
So Kelly, I'm happy to answer that question because we do get it every single meeting pretty much. There are publicly accessible restrooms in the McNichols building, and those will continue to operate. And we have identified additional locations that would be basically temporary restroom locations to help support that for the events that would be hosted in these areas. So we have looked at additional locations for temporary restrooms. Unfortunately, the way that these 4 projects work, it's not within the scope or the funding to provide restrooms in these 4 areas, but Parks is looking at potential additional locations throughout the park to further address that need. But just know that it seems like we need better signage, better clarification about the McNichols restrooms, because they do exist and they have very long hours, and an attendant that staffs them during all of the open hours.
Yeah, I'm aware of the McNichols restrooms. I just figured it looks like these are pretty large event spaces, and I figured that the quantities of restrooms provided in the McNichols building and the proximity to those events are probably not suitable to what kind of the renderings are portraying as these very large gatherings.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it is something that we work with the people who put on events within the park to help us provide additional restrooms that are kind of scaled to their size of events. It's hard for us to provide restrooms that could serve like the Cinco de Mayo festival and the day-to-day activation of the park, but it's definitely something that Parks is well aware is a major need in Civic Center.
Great, thanks. Any other questions, comments from commissioners? No? Well, thank you for presenting the concepts and a little bit about the public process thus far. It's really exciting. Good luck with continuing on.
Thank you so much for giving us so much time and feedback. I think the discussion's been really, really interesting and helpful. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And so Jen, I believe that's the end of the agenda. Were there any other discussion items?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know that we had our design guideline update kickoff meeting that happened last Wednesday. And thank you to a bunch of you who attended that meeting. Greatly appreciated it. We thought that it went fairly well, and hopefully you all did too. We got some really great feedback, great questions about it too. So for those of you who weren't able to watch it, attend live, I can send you a link to the recording for sure. And then just a reminder, we have the Historic Denver dinner that we try to get tables at every year. We still have 2 spots open, so if any commissioners are interested, let us know. Right now I have George, Erica, Gary, and Julie on the list. They have people, sorry, they have an email that just went out that I'm going to send to people saying that you have to be vaccinated. You have to be vaccinated to be a commissioner. So, but also you need to be vaccinated, or you need to have a negative test within the past 72 hours. So hopefully that will give you all a little bit of peace of mind about the event. Gary, yeah.
Does that mean we need to prove it somehow when we go, or are they just?
I'll look at the email. I'll send it to you.
You should have your card, Gary.
I don't, am I supposed to carry that with me all the time?
So what I've always been told is you can take a picture of it, and if you need to show proof, you can show the picture of it. But I'll look at the email and I'll let you guys know what it says.
I lost mine, and you can actually log on. Colorado has a immunization website that works well too. So how I lost my COVID card, I have no idea, but I did, and so it works to look it up online too.
Yeah, I heard there was like an app for that.
I actually have it. I am not one that likes to get new apps just because they're there, but it's actually pretty handy. And it connects your driver's license and your vaccine record to it.
There's actually an app that if your cell phone came in close contact with somebody else's cell phone who tested positive, you get a notice that you might be exposed.
I've received those notices through that app.
What is the app?
It's not an app. It's through your phone. It's in the settings section.
Oh.
This is Crystal, and I'm just gonna jump in because I used that and it is useless in my opinion. And I read a lot of articles how it gave false information and it wasn't uploading the information. And I didn't want to get scared all the time, so I turned it off. That's my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt. But
every now and then
I think it would be helpful if it told you like an area, like if you were like, if it was like at the grocery store or something that you went to. Yeah. But it literally just tells you a date. And so you have no clue really how, where, why. So just FYI.
You guys just got me so excited about this. And then
it's also heavily dependent on someone testing positive and reporting that they've tested positive.
Exactly.
So,
well, considering that our purview is not to talk about the merits or cons of these apps, really, I wanted just to let you guys know who are attending the Historic Denver dinner, what you need to do. And we do still have a couple spots left. So if anyone is interested, let me know. And I will happily add you to the list. So
great. And if that's the end of the meeting, then I will close the meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
It's an app for that.
Thank you.